Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to share our podcast on my Facebook. Okay. Hi, welcome to Paranormal Hot Seat. I am Donna Guerin, your host for tonight.
And I'm Stacy Guest, your co-host for this evening. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, welcome. And tonight we have as a guest, we have Mark Anthony. He is the psychic explorer, JD, the psychic explorer, and he's better known as the psychic lawyer. He is a fourth generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits, and he's an Oxford educated attorney licensed to practice in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Nice. The psychic explorer travels to mystical locations in remote corners of the world and examines ancient mysteries and supernatural phenomena. That's impressive. So Mark appears nationwide on TV and radio, including CBS TV's The Doctors, and I'm hoping I say this right, the Gaia TV. He can correct me when he comes on. Beyond Belief with George Norrie, and he is the co-host of the live stream show The Psychic and the Doc on the Transformation Network. He is also a featured speaker at conferences, expos, universities, which includes Brown, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale. Mark Anthony is a columnist for the Best Holistic Life magazine. His bestseller is The Afterlife Frequency. It's a gold winner of the COVR Visionary Awards, which we will be talking about, and was up for Pulitzer and ranked by prettyprogressive.com as one of the top books about faith in God. And his bestseller books are Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. So please welcome Mr. Anthony here.
Hey, Donna, thanks for having me on. And Stacy, thanks.
Long introduction you have here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, welcome.
Yes,
I
welcome.
really appreciate it. So it was funny. One of the guys in our, I can't say a sister group, but we're part of Para Family. We have several different groups in our little organization, and he posted a screenshot of your book, The Afterlife Frequency, and I was like, I was like, that's interesting. I started reading that book too. I was like, he's going to be a guest on our show on Sunday, right? He was like, oh, okay. So that was pretty cool. What a coincidence. He just was studying to be a Reiki master, and he saw it in the bookstore, and he said it looked interesting, so he picked it up and bought it.
Well, I'm glad that he did. And yeah, the Afterlife Frequency came out just about a year ago, and I'm really humbled by what's been happening with it. Within a couple weeks, it had been submitted for a Pulitzer Prize, and then prettyprogressive.com designated as one of the top books about faith in God. Then I understand that film legend Shirley MacLaine recommended it.
Oh, wow.
It became recommended reading by the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, Helping Parents Heal. And then the COVR Awards, that's the Coalition of Visionary Resources. It won the first place in the reincarnation and afterlife categories. And I mean, it just keeps it's maintained bestseller status. So I'm very, very honored that my book has been so well received and is touching people, around the world.
Well, I can't wait to finish reading it. I just recently got it, so like I said, I just started on it, but yeah, it seems like it's going to be very interesting.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go
ahead. No, I was just going to say, so you write about in the book about how it is growing up psychic, so maybe you can elaborate on it a little bit.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the subtitle of the Afterlife Frequency is the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. And what I do in the book is I explain all the different forms of spirit contact, whether it's mediumship, which is communicating with spirits, or visitation, where spirits will come and communicate with you. Either you'll feel them around, or maybe you have an experience in a dream. Near-death experiences, deathbed vision, shared death experiences. And I explain all the contact on the basis of science. But spoiler alert, it is not a dry and boring book. I suffered through too much of that in law school and in the practice. So all my books, Never Letting Go, Evidence of Eternity, and now the Afterlife Frequency, they all read like novels because I want to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
And we learn from stories. So I'll explain the scientific concept and then illustrate it with a story or several stories so that people can relate to it. Because, I mean, really, do we really want to read an algebra textbook? No.
Oh, I don't know. There's some good algebra textbooks out there.
Yeah, the one that always just get me is if a train is leaving Chicago and it's going this way, and it's like, and if another train is leaving, and my thought was, well, then just take a plane, you know. So
I hated those word sentences too, especially when the same thing, but then they would say one train had 15 watermelons, the other train only had 12. You know, it's like, come on.
I mean it. But the thing is, though, that type of mathematics is very important. My father was in aerospace. He was a Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer.
Oh,
and
wow.
He had mediumistic abilities, because I know that, Donna, you're going to ask about my childhood. And my mother was also a medium. She was a commercial illustrator and artist. And, you know, so for all intents and purposes, we were the all-American family next door.
Wow.
Sort of. we weren't very Brady Bunch. We were more Addams Family, I guess. But, you know, because when I was around 3.5, I started seeing spirits. And, you know, it's not unusual for a toddler to have invisible friends.
Yeah.
But I remember mom going, "Oh, he's got it," and Dad going, "Oh, geez, he's got it."
Funny.
So how was it different growing up with parents with psychic abilities?
Well, it was tough when I was a teenager because I couldn't seem to get away with anything.
That's what I was going to say. Could you get away with anything?
Oh, well, you know how teenagers are always up to something. It doesn't necessarily mean bad, but they always have their own. Or when I was one, I always had some agenda going on that I usually didn't want my parents to know about, but inevitably they did. And I think all parents have that connection with their kids to some extent, but my parents had it on steroids. So, where were you? And I'd say, "Oh, I wasn't." "No, you weren't." They always knew that. But the thing is, when I was about 5 years old, I started first grade, and my dad's family was Baptist, although he had to convert to Catholicism to marry my mother. She was a nice Italian girl. And I remember them telling me the story that he had to ask permission to marry my mother. And my grandfather was from Italy. And obviously this was, years before I was born, but I heard the story from my mom and dad and my grandmother. And my grandfather used to sit in this big chair, this big imposing chair. And my dad went up there and said, "Sir, I love your daughter, Jeannie, very much." He goes, "Yes. You want to ask me something?" He said, "I would like permission for her hand in marriage." And my grandfather said, "What a religion are you?" He says, "Baptist." He goes, "Baptist? No. If you want to marry my Jeannie, you must have become a Catholic." And my dad's like, "Are you serious?" He goes, "I'm a very serious." And in those days, nowadays you're just happy if your whoever your child's marrying isn't in prison, but back then that was a real big deal. And so my father loved my mother so much, he went through the whole thing. And what's funny is when I was in law school, my roommate was Jewish, and we were talking about our religions, and I remember he said, "It sounds like being Catholic is as much of a hassle as it is being Jewish. So unless you're born it, why would you want to do it?" So at any rate, my father converted, but we always had a very broad view of spirituality, and that is a direct side effect of being a medium or being mediums. And so our dinner conversations as I got older, we would talk about Jesus, we'd talk about Krishna, we'd talk about Buddha, we'd talk about Edgar Cayce. So it was very interesting. Now when I look back on it, I realize what a privilege it was. But Stacy, to answer your question, for me, that was my normal until, when I started getting around other kids and their families, I realized not everybody's family is like mine.
Right.
You don't come home and they're talking about seeing spirits. Other people would be like, I don't know, talking about, oh, I went to the store and we bought butter, that type of thing.
Yours was just a little bit more unconventional. That's really great, though, that your parents were so open about teaching you all the different religions. And because growing up, I was strict, just non-denominational Christian. And then I got into college and I took that world religions course. And
that'll do it.
That completely. I remember my dad telling me that is going to mess you up, that class. And it did, but for the best.
Yeah.
The best way possible. Yeah. It really opened up my eyes to everything. So that's awesome.
It's one of my favorite quotes. It was from Gandhi, and he said, "What religion is God?"
Mm-hmm.
Humans created religion, and in all my books, I say that God exists in spite of religion, not because of religion. Because people get so weird about it. Our way is right, your way is wrong. Yeah. And isn't it amazing, the people who believe in hell, which I do not. Okay, I do not believe in hell. I don't believe in the devil. I don't believe in demons. And I explain why in the afterlife frequency. But have you ever noticed that the people who believe in hell have this sick love affair with it, and they're firmly convinced that everybody is going to hell except them?
Yep. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So. My family does that to me a lot. Yeah.
I saw an interview, when that movie Bohemian Rhapsody came out. And so I was interested, to learn more about Freddie Mercury. So I was looking at some YouTube videos, and they were interviewing him because he was a member of the Zoroastrian religion. And the Zoroastrian religion is the oldest monotheistic religion in the world. The oldest, belief in one God. And Zoroaster was a prophet that lived in what is now Iran. They called it Persia then. And if you look at the similarities between Zoroastrianism and Christianity, they're amazing. And Zoroaster, there's also a view of hell in that religion. And Freddie Mercury was being interviewed, and they asked him, say, well, according to your religion, you're gay and you're going to go to hell. And he goes, well, I think hell would be much more interesting. He said the people there would be much more fun, And it was hilarious the way he was saying it. And I'm thinking, all the people that, they believe in hell and everyone's going to it. And I'm looking at them going, would I really want to spend eternity with all these really uptight, people? But the thing is, I'm making light of this. Certainly, I believe in life after death. I do believe in a universal form of justice, in karma, but I believe it in the form of reincarnation.
Yeah.
And as a theological scholar and a near-death experience researcher, and as a medium, in all the readings I've conducted, where spirits will start talking about the afterlife, and they do mention reincarnation. And one of the fascinating aspects of near-death experiences is that pretty much everyone who's had one, myself included, believes in reincarnation. The whole idea of you go to the other side and it's either going up or going down.
Yeah.
To me, that's mythology. That's mythology. And there were reasons why these ancient and primitive cultures developed this, because they wanted to scare people into conformity and into not doing negative or evil things.
Right.
And that's worked real well for human history, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I know, right? So I one of the things I've been wanting to ask you is, so you're an attorney and you're a psychic. How did that work out? I mean, how does that? You have to tell me about that.
Yeah, it seems like a rather bipolar existence. Well, I've just, for the record, I am devoting all my time now to my spiritual work.
Okay.
as a medium, as a near-death experience researcher, as a lecturer, and visiting the mystical locations. So, because people are like, they contact me and they want me to be their lawyer, and I appear on TV and radio as a legal analyst in high-profile cases, particularly when the paranormal and the legal system collide, which actually
that's a
happens.
thing.
It is a very big thing.
Wow.
Think about somebody who's accused of murder and says that they're possessed by demons.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there are a number of incidents where people have sued to break a contract for the sale of a house because they bought or leased a house that they believe is haunted. And that gets really tricky. The state of New York, I think the name of the case is Stambovsky. It's the Stambovsky case, and it went up to the New York Supreme Court. And here's what happened: this guy bought a house, and then poltergeist type activity started happening. All right, and so he sued to break the contract, saying that the seller failed to disclose that it was a haunted house. Now, this puts the judge in that case in a very precarious position, because if a judge says that the house is haunted, then that is a violation of separation of church and state, because you have a judge making an official pronouncement that there's some form of an afterlife. All right. But this judge was the Supreme Court was very clever, because upon discovery in the lawsuit, the plaintiff's attorney, the one suing to get out of the contract, they found out that the guy selling the house used to conduct haunted tours of the house.
Oh, wow.
So it had a haunted reputation that he failed to disclose. So the court system got around it. They didn't say there's an afterlife or was haunted. It was a material fact, and it stigmatized the property. And so therefore the contract could be overturned. Now, since that time, something like 30 states now have in the stigmatized property statutes failure to disclose a paranormal reputation.
Oh my gosh.
Property is and so this is where being a lawyer and a medium really comes in handy. And I could go on and on. I mean, there's other facets of that. In fact, there's even insurance companies now who issue liability policies for paranormal investigators.
Wow.
Well, think about it. It's like those movies when you go hunting a vampire, they go like when the sun is setting. Now, how dumb is that? Go when the sun is rising, all right?
Yeah.
So paranormal investigators, and I've been on a number of paranormal investigations, and I'm affiliated with Phantom Detectives. It's a great organization. But people tend to go into these abandoned prisons and insane asylums and houses at night.
Yep.
And it's dark. So what if somebody falls down a stairway and breaks their leg?
Right.
Somebody's going to be liable, right? And so that's why insurance companies are issuing policies for people who are engaged in these investigations. Right. And then there's been claims that, well, what if they go in and they're there to clear the house of the boogeymen, and they don't, and somebody wants to sue? So there's all these legal issues that are now coming up in the paranormal field. And so I'm honored to be the media's go-to guy when that happens, because I can, see both sides of the issue.
Yeah, I want to do the Yuma Territorial Prison, and they want $1 million liability insurance before they will let us do it. So I was like, okay. And then, of course, you have to find the right company that's going to let you, that's going to insure you, because everybody is like, well, there's not a what am I trying to say? There's not a subject for that, or whatever it is that they can't.
Well, you got to look around. There are companies that will do that, and they may do it for a particular period of time. Let's say that you're going to do the investigation, so you can buy a policy for 3 days. That type of thing. It's like if you threw a big party, an event liability, it'd be the same type of thing. Yeah. So that is out there. And the thing is, we're all in the paranormal, the metaphysical world business, but you still have to have a practical aspect to it.
Yeah.
And if we are going to engage in these investigations, and I always tell people, turn on the lights. You don't need to be running around. It's like I've seen these people that, I guess they hold themselves out as physical mediums, which ectoplasm is supposed to come out of them and do. And I've seen a number of them, and I've yet to be persuaded by any of them. Wow. And they insist on it being in pitch darkness. And then they have to play loud rock and roll in between the manifestations, or what they say is the different spirits coming through. And it's like they're playing loud rock and roll to muffle the sound of the people wearing the night vision goggles, moving stuff around in the rooms. And look, my dad was a Navy SEAL, and I know when I see a green light moving around there in pitch dark, I know what that is.
Right.
And so the thing is, spirituality should be in the light.
Yeah. Okay.
Buddha worked in the light. Jesus worked in the light. We all can do spirit communication with the lights on. Yeah. So these people that say you must sit in the dark and hear, that is absolute nonsense. Turn on the light. If it isn't in the light, then it isn't real.
Mm-hmm. So we got a couple of people in there. We got Scaredy Cast, they're new to our Machiavelli Paranormal's team. They're going to be doing North Arizona. And Eldon, who is our founder. Hey, guys.
What's up, guys?
So turn the lights on. Okay.
Well, I mean, also when you're, we like to turn the lights on because it creates an ambiance, but to sit in pitch darkness. Now, I do understand that if you're setting up the infrared cameras because you're looking for infrared anomalies and things like that I understand. But if you're using EVP equipment and spirit box, or you're using you're scanning for voice and things like that, you don't need to be sitting in the dark.
Yeah.
And plus it's dangerous. You don't want somebody tripping and falling or running into something.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Stacy, you have something?
I do. How did your work as a lawyer get you interested in understanding brain function and the nature of consciousness?
That's a great question. Well, as an attorney, I started off as a prosecutor, and then I shifted over to private practice and in criminal defense, but then I expanded into personal injury litigation. And I specialized in brain damage and head injury. So I had to study the human brain and neurology. And what I liked about practicing law, Stacy, is that it puts you in everything. In other words, throughout the course of my career, I had to work with chemists, forensics, physicists, phlebotomists, all the ists and isms. I had to work with those. And so you have to learn about it. And I started working with the human brain and with brain injury cases, like if you're injured on the right frontal lobe, what the deficits would be versus the left frontal lobe. And so then when I started working full time as a medium, and you see a lot of mediums, particularly ones with TV shows, they're interviewed. How does this work? I don't know. It's like, well, I do know. Okay. I know. Isn't it amazing? You get these people on there and they're like, and the thing is, because a lot of them are characters and they're funny and they're talented. I mean, they have ability. But the thing is, that doesn't bring credibility to the field. And as a lawyer, everything I do is about presenting evidence. And as an evidential medium, I have to present evidence to authenticate the identity of the spirit and the genuineness of the contact. And so all of a sudden it started tying together that there is a part of our brain, the pineal gland, which is about 4 to 5 inches behind the center of our forehead. And for our listeners who do yoga, that's the third eye chakra.
Yeah, that's the third eye. Okay.
That's the third eye. And the pineal gland regulates our ability to perceive light. But it does a lot more than that. It's between the size of like a grain of rice and a bean. And it's a very small organ, but the most mysterious and complex, perhaps, in the body. Recent studies have found calcite and magnetite crystals in it. Calcite and magnetite, meaning electromagnetic fields.
Yep.
All right, electricity, an EM field flows through our brain. What was the first radio? A quartz crystal with copper wire running low levels of electricity. So we have a much more sophisticated version of that in our head. And this is also, the pineal gland regulates our brain wave frequencies. So when you hear people say, I'm raising my vibration to communicate, it's because the pineal gland is regulating this. I go into great detail explaining this in the afterlife frequency, but basically the pineal gland is what it controls our ability to receive visions, clairvoyant, auditory, and data. The other receptor area is right at the bottom of the rib cage in the diaphragm. That's the solar plexus, which in yoga is the yellow chakra, the third eye chakra. When I talk about the chakras in Hinduism, which means yoga, there are 7 main chakras in our body. Interestingly enough, the location of all those chakras coincides with the 7 endocrine glands in the body. And what do the endocrine glands do? They perform chemical electrical functions and release various hormones. So with the third eye, the solar plexus, it's the second most complex bundle of nerves outside of the cerebral cortex in the body. In fact, neuroscientists, neurobiology or neuroscience rather, is the field of science that studies the human brain. They're now referring to the solar plexus as our second brain. And other animals, like an octopus, has 5 brains. So something like an octopus can have more than one brain. I would think that a human being could. And the solar plexus is where we receive the feeling, the sensations. Like for all of you out there who are parents and you get that feeling in your stomach that something's going on with your child, do you think that's a fluke? No, that's because you have a major vibrational receptor in the solar plexus. That's why when people say trust your gut, that's where that expression comes from. So these are the type of things that I studied, that I learned about through anatomy and physiology in my work as a personal injury attorney. But then I expanded my research into the studies that are conducted by legitimate sources, universities, about psychic activity and how and where we receive this information.
Wow. That's wow. Yeah.
Well, I know, and that's why when I'm in interviews like this and they ask me, I can give you an answer as opposed to, gee, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, the quest for knowledge, the quest for understanding always begins with, I don't know. And there's an answer out there.
Yeah.
Whether or not we have it yet. Yeah, you just got to find it.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're known as the psychic explorer. So what exactly does that mean?
Take a look at my office.
You have all kinds of trinkets.
All kinds of stuff, and they all have a story behind them.
Those masks back there I've been staring at, those are really interesting.
Yeah, they're cool. The masks are African, but I've got African, I've got Thai, Peruvian, Egyptian.
Wow.
There's some Iranian things. I've always been fascinated with the study of God. and I've always been fascinated with history and archaeology. So I always, when I was practicing law, I'd take my vacations and I would go to Machu Picchu in Peru. I would go to various places around the world. I've been to Japan, Southeast Asia, Central America, the Caribbean, all over the U.S. and other parts in South America. And I would study the religious beliefs, go to places that are known for ancient mysteries. I remember when I went to Stonehenge, I was just like loving that.
Awesome.
Yeah, Stonehenge is great. And Loch Ness. Okay, when I was at Loch Ness, yeah, and it's so funny when you're at Loch Ness, if you're walking by and you're always looking, because you're like, you always look for some monster or something coming up out of there. And every time there's a splash in the water, you're looking to hope that some dinosaurs coming out of it. It was funny because I was talking to a couple of the locals, and they're like, "Well, we don't want there to be any discoveries here." And I go, "Why?" He goes, "It's good for business."
Too funny. So you purposely sought out places to go that are very spiritual.
That holy places,
yeah, holy places. I spent a lot of time in Japan, in Buddhist temples, and also studying the Shinto religion. Shinto, did you ever see you see like an ornate horizontal beam, and then there's two vertical beams? You usually see them in water. Those are called the torii, and those are shrines to the Shinto spirits, the Shinto gods that they call kami, Kami. And when I was in Japan and I would go to a Shinto shrine, I'd feel something. I'd feel a non-human spiritual intelligence. And then when I was in the British Isles, what they call a fairy, I would feel the same thing. And then when I was in Hawaii, the Metahune, I felt the same thing. These are what can be termed the elementals. And Stacy's nodding. She knows the elementals. Yeah, elementals are non-human spirits, intelligent spirits, but they're not really concerned with us. They're more aligned with the animal kingdom, with plants, with earth energies. They're aligned with different things, and they're not necessarily evil or negative. They're just non-human intelligence. In Ireland, they call them sprites or leprechauns. In the Nordic countries, they call them elves. I understand in Iceland, I've been to Iceland, but I didn't see this. There's a sign in this one place that said, "Beware of the elves." And it's not a joke, and so elves are an elemental. So
wow.
I found that there's all types of those energies around. And then I like visiting, having been raised Catholic, and I wouldn't consider myself necessarily Catholic. I take more of a universal approach. Going to places where supposedly miracles have occurred. It just touches my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Jerusalem?
I have not. Have you?
No, I've never left the country, but my best friend went out there, and she just said it was amazing.
My mom went there, spent about 2 weeks there, and she had a great time. The people there, she said, are very nice. I actually have been to Chichen Itza, which is in Mexico. Yeah, I felt something when I was there.
Oh,
I felt a presence and energy, just a vibe to the whole place. That was really cool.
Well, there's a reason that these particular sites were selected. And this is yet it would have to be verified, but when I was going to Oxford is when I spent time at Stonehenge, and one of the Oxford dons, the professors, was telling me, when you go to and there's a number of structures throughout the British Isles similar to Stonehenge. They got the monoliths. Have you ever seen Outlander? Come on, every woman's seen Outlander, right? Okay, all right. They got this the monoliths. I like it. I think I like period pieces, and it's a cool story and all that. But Stonehenge is probably like the most defined and elaborate. And there's essentially 3 rings. like the outer ring, the inner ring, or the middle ring, and then the inner ring. My understanding, according to what this Oxford professor told me, is if you take a Geiger counter and you start picking up the Earth's natural radiation, when you get to the outer ring, the radiation level increases. Then you get to the next ring, it increases more. You get to the center ring, it increases even more. Now, I ask you, how did Druids 5,000 years ago know that?
Hmm.
Do you think it's just a coincidence they just happened to build these monolithic rings from stones they had to haul from like 150 miles away from Wales here? And we still don't know how they did it. And I know there are UFO people like, oh, UFOs did it. And maybe they did. But, that's also insulting our ancestors.
Yeah.
They were no less clever. They just, they didn't sit there like at Chichen Itza. And for those of you who don't know what Chichen Itza or familiar with it, it's it's an ancient Mayan city with this huge pyramid, and the city's still being excavated, the whole area, and it's just amazing. And the Mayans did all of this without any metal tools, but they didn't sit there and go, we don't have metal. First off, we don't know what metal is, and if we did, then we don't have it. They didn't sit there and go, well, we want to build a pyramid, but they figured it out.
Yeah.
Okay, they figured it out how to do this. And when you look at a society like the Mayans and like the Egyptians, the Incas, but let's talk about the Mayans for a minute. Their knowledge of astronomy is stellar. I mean, it's incredible. Also, their mathematics. And I know that in what was it? 2012? When the Mayan calendar was supposed to end, and the world's going to come to an end. And I was on a lot of shows explaining, what that is. The Mayan calendar is 5,000 years, and it was clicking over to the next 5,000 year cycle. And that 5,000 year cycle happened to end on December 21st of 2012, and on the winter solstice. And so the Mayans were so sophisticated about that. The problem with the Mayans is that they engaged in human sacrifice and cannibalism, as did the Aztecs and most of the Mesoamerican cultures. And so as much as you want to appreciate that, it's like when you go on their temples and their pyramids, you start feeling something. Oh, yeah. Thousands of people had their hearts ripped out there.
Wow.
While they were alive.
Yeah.
While they were alive.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, the Mayans had that serpent god, and that is carved all over Chichen Itza. And that and the sacrificial stone where they did all that is still there as well.
Oh yeah. Well, there's there's this huge controversy over Columbus Day, and I understand it. Okay, and I'm always been a champion for Native Americans and their rights, but when the Spanish landed in Mexico in the early 1500s, Cortez, all right, what was the mindset of them? Well, it was conquistador, meaning conqueror, but they also had with them a whole bunch of Catholic priests. And at the time in Spain, the Spanish Inquisition was in full swing. So the Spanish Inquisition was about eliminating Jews and Muslims, any non-Catholics from Spain, and keeping the religion pure. All right, so they land in Central America, and they encounter a bunch of people wearing headdresses of birds who are committing human sacrifice, and they have serpent gods and all this. So clearly this was devil worship, and they were super rich and loaded with gold. I mean, this gave the conquistadors will eradicate their culture, steal all their gold, and were acting in furtherance of the church. Now, that is why that type of destruction went on. And I'm not for one nanosecond justifying it, but you have to understand that was the mindset of the Europeans that were coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, they were a conquering nation, just like Caesar, you know. And I agree with you. I'm not justifying it, but Caesar didn't say, I came, I conquered. I feel really bad about it. Like that was
I totally
you know, that's what he did. That's what conquering nations did. Unfortunately, that's what our history is. So
well, yeah, I mean, it's like, we hear all the time about our founding fathers. Well, a lot of them owned slaves.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, they did.
There's a thing right there,
Well, we are healing from the wounds of the past.
We have to learn from it.
We have to, exactly. Yeah. And I remember when I was at Dachau concentration camp, which was a Nazi extermination camp. And I believe Dachau was the first one. It was constructed in the city of Dachau, which is essentially a suburb of Munich. And Munich's a beautiful city with a great history. And the experience that I had there was absolutely horrific. I was 19 years old and I'd been partying with all my college friends the night before. So I was hungover and we thought, oh, let's go to Dachau because this will be interesting historically. Well, a 19-year-old hungover medium who isn't prepared for the vibrational energy. Wow. And suddenly I'm walking around and looking at the crematoriums and the barracks, and I see thousands and thousands of spirits, or rather the residual energy echo, because they're not stuck there. Of this, I saw the sunken faces in the prison garb, and they're shrieking. And I remember I collapsed to my knees and burst into tears. And all my college friends were like, "Dude, what is your problem?" But one of my friends, who was actually from my hometown and knew about me and my family, he came and grabbed me and goes, "Come on, Mark, we're getting out of here." And on the way out, I'll never forget seeing written in 7 different languages, "If we do not remember the past, we are doomed to repeat it."
Wow. Yep.
And I think at that same concentration camp, one of the Jews that were kept there wrote on the wall, "If there is a God, he's going to have to answer to me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's when, it gets into a very heavy duty discussion about how could God allow such a thing to happen. And it would probably take a lot more time than we've got.
Yeah.
And but it really is. But years and years ago, and I think I saw it on like one of those old movie channels. There was a movie with the late great George Burns called "Oh God."
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? Yeah. And John Denver was the star of the movie, and he played, this average kind of a guy, and he encounters God, who's George Burns. Looks like this little old man, and eventually he figures out that he's God, and he says, "How can you tolerate bigotry and war and starvation and disease?" And God looks at him and said, "How can I tolerate it?
Mm-hmm.
I gave you free will."
That's what I was about to say, free will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, people don't think about that. We have the ability to control a lot of this that goes on. Like I said, we do have the free will. It's wow.
Yeah, it's choices that we make.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get all political, but let's say there's a leader of a country, we'll call it Russia, who's a narcissistic sociopath who decides that he wants to somehow resurrect the defunct Russian Empire and unprovokedly invade a country that posed no threat to him at all. Okay. Yeah. And hundreds of thousands of his people and the people of the country have died. And yet that person could, in a flash, decide for that war to no longer be happening. Mm-hmm. That's a perfect example of free will. Now, on an individualized basis, most of us aren't running countries with massive armies and nuclear arsenals, thank God. But thank you, God. But we do have free will. Mm-hmm. And when we go around and fling out things like, "Well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you," That's a lot harder than it sounds. And yet it's also very easy at the same time to treat people the way you wish to be treated. So while we may not be able to change the world, we all have the capacity to influence our little corner of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so free will is a very important thing. Sometimes that free will involves not saying that acerbic comment that you really want to. It could also involve, and I want to say this to everybody. Think about when somebody that you consider physically beautiful acknowledges you, looks you in the eye, and smiles at you. And let's face it, we all get that, you all get that. The next time you see an elderly person, say hi.
Oh yeah.
Good morning. How are you?
Yep.
Because you may be the only person all day that acknowledges that person's existence. Open the door for him or her. I was at a restaurant and I saw this he must have been 90 years old, this old man. And it was a fairly nice restaurant. And there's all these young employees. They're at the area when you walk right in and you go up and say, hey, I want to get a table for so many people. There's 4 employees sitting there and they're all talking and laughing to each other. They completely ignored this 90-year-old man struggling to open the door, and he had a walker. And so I went over and I opened the door for him. I helped them. And I turned to them and I said, did the 4 of you even see that elderly man? They all looked at me like, Hurf? And I said, you guys, if I was the manager, I would fire every single one of you. Mm-hmm. You help an old person.
Yeah.
And all I'm thinking is, what kind of parents raised these people? And respect. What kind of management is teaching them? One of my first jobs, I worked at a 5-star hotel. And it was like being in Downton Abbey, except I, was having my lunch down, in the basement, not up with Lord Grantham and everybody. Okay. But I remember I had to wear this like little tuxedo outfit but I learned manners. You open the doors for people. Yep. Yes, sir. No, sir. And all that. And we were trained to be very, very, you don't speak unless you're spoken to. And when you do, it's short, it's sweet, it's very polite, and you project that image. And I'm not seeing that being taught. So the reason I'm saying this is when you see an elderly person, it exercise free will and help them. And I'm going to follow that up with, we all know somebody elderly.
Yep.
Okay. Pick up a phone. Don't text. Pick up a telephone, call them. Hey, grandma, hey, grandpa, hey, great uncle, whoever. And even better, write them a letter, not an email, a letter. What do old people? A lot of them
don't work computers anyway.
Yeah, no, they don't. And what do old people get in the mail? Bills or junk mail. But if they get, even if you send a postcards, for those who don't know, there are these things with pictures on them, and you turn them around and you can write 2 or 3 sentences and put a stamp on it. But the thing is, somebody gets something like that in the mail. That makes their
that makes their entire week probably. Yeah.
This is, first off, it's basic human decency. Secondly, it's called good karma.
Yeah.
And that's something you definitely want to create.
Yeah. I work for a local county municipality, and I've had people tell me, you're the nicest government person that I've met. It's like, there's no reason with the line of work that I do to be nasty at people because they're in violation or something. It's, it's like, my thing is to work with people and don't make them feel like they're under attack because they have too much junk on their property or they got these inoperable vehicles on their property. Okay, so we just, we're going to work together. We're going to get it cleaned up, and that's fine. And they're just so grateful. I show up on time, be nice to them, and they appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we got completely off the subject of your book.
I know, it's like, okay.
Well, actually we didn't, because in my book, I do talk about karma.
Oh, okay.
And the balance in the universe. And the reason I'm talking about that is people sit there and go, well, how do I create good karma? Try opening a door for somebody with a walker.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. And the afterlife frequency, the reason that I wrote it is because so many people were asking me, is there a scientific explanation for the for life after death? And one of the key concepts that I introduce is called the electromagnetic soul and the EMS. Everything is made of molecules. We all had to learn that in science. Molecules, in turn, are made of electrons, or excuse me, of atoms, which in turn are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons,
Right.
which in turn are composed of the smallest particle of electromagnetic energy known as a quantum. For our physics people, an electron is a quantum, so I covered that. All right, because an electron is 1/1800th the size of a proton. All right, everyone's happy. So what that means is everything, including this water bottle, me, the two of you, the radio waves that this show is being broadcast on, the surface of Mars, the rings of Saturn, are all on the most basic level the same electromagnetic energy. And everything from the quantum level on up vibrates at different frequencies. So our brain does not create our consciousness, it only hosts it. Every great spiritual teacher from Zoroaster through Buddha, Moses, Confucius, Jesus, Muhammad, all the way up through Native American spirituality, religions of the Pacific, all teach that the soul, the consciousness, the spirit pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on when the body dies. We know from the field of neuroscience that the brain has an electromagnetic field. We know from the laws of thermodynamics and physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So that's why I created the term the electromagnetic soul to describe what we really are: pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. So when this hard drive fails, we live on. And the criticism, I had one guy say that, well, that sounds so technical. And my colleague, Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, said that, yes, but the electromagnetic soul is an acronym for source of universal love. So the thing is, there is a logical explanation for everything. And my EMS theory, it supports near-death experiences, mediumship, afterlife communication. It's all there. And that's one of the main reasons that I wrote the afterlife frequency, and to teach people how to recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking it, and then trust the message. It's what I call the RAP technique: recognize, accept, feel, trust. And so these are some of the teaching modalities of the afterlife frequency. And I know that we're coming up on the holidays, and a lot of people are facing the holidays, whether it's Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa, without a loved one. And the afterlife frequency is the book for you, or it's the book to give to someone who you don't know what to give them, who is facing this. And if people want to find out more about my book, scheduling a reading with me, I've got upcoming what's called Light Circle online events where it's limited to 6 people and everybody gets a reading. Plus my show, The Psychic and the Doc, every Thursday, where my co-host is Dr. Pat Basili, and she's awesome. She's a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. So people call in, I do a reading, and then she gives them her insights so that they get the maximum benefit from the reading. Please go to my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my book, Afterlife Frequency.
And that's where you can find information on your shows and how to...
My shows, sign up for my newsletter, readings, all of it. I found it was easier to get the domain as the same as the book, so you don't have to remember other things. Afterlife Frequency.
Awesome. Yeah, because when you were talking about that, one of the questions was, how did your book deal with people that deal with homicide, post-traumatic stress, and survivor's guilt?
It goes into people who have suffered from all of those, and how through spirit contact, the spirits come to our rescue, in a sense, and in a very real sense, on how to deal with that. and also the how spirits view those things, and it helps us with that, because with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, we tend to think only of veterans suffering from that, and I do go very deeply into veterans suffering with that, but we all suffer from PTSD in varying extent.
I was actually diagnosed with that.
There you go.
It took a long time though, because I was suffering and I didn't know exactly what it was. And I went to see a therapist and I got diagnosed with that. I'm not a veteran.
well, yeah, but something terrible happened to you and you're coping with it. And it could be a death in the family, or it could be, and you don't have to, tell us, but it could be some type of assault or psychological attack or trauma. Everybody is coping with that. And so my book goes into that, in how to recover from it and how to cope with it. Also, the book goes into what if somebody is murdered? Could be a family member or a friend. Now, there's another PTSD issue there, but also how spirits look at, spirits who've been murdered, how they communicate about that, which is really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they say that like spirits can contact you. They come to you while you're asleep, because my son had that happen. My mother came to him while he was asleep, and she said, "Baby, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye." Aww. And he woke up and he called me right away, and he was in tears. He said it was like she was in the room with him.
Because she was.
Yeah, I was like, you're the first person, you're the first grandchild to call a grandma. So yeah, you were. It's like, just say goodbye.
She felt his grief, and that's what I call a frequency beacon, where there's that vibration again. Think of everyone that we love in this world and the other side. We're all connected like by a three-dimensional spider web. Okay, so he's grieving and he sends that vibration. The spirit picks up on it and is drawn to you, because electromagnetic souls move at the speed of light. Everything in the EM spectrum, light, microwaves, radio waves, gamma waves, or electricity, all moves at 186,282 miles per second.
Wow.
And so when spirits pick up on that, and conversely, they can send us a message too, a frequency beacon. Let's say you're driving in your car and your son's thinking about his grandma, and all of a sudden he turns on the radio and boom, there is that song that makes him think about her. Now, was that a fluke that he was prompted to turn on the song at that precise moment? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Wow. So one of the other questions was, how does the afterlife frequency help people develop spiritual situational awareness?
Well, that's what I was talking about with the RAFT technique, how to recognize, accept, feel, and trust. And I give some exercises in the book as well about that.
Yeah, but definitely go read it, guys, because I started it and it's very interesting. And I know somebody else who started reading it. So yeah, definitely go out and get this book. They can tell people where they can find your book.
Worldwide, at all fine bookstores, on Amazon.com. Yeah, and if you go to my website, afterlifefrequency.com, it'll give you the links to get all my books. And all my books are on audio, Kindle, ebook, hard copy, and they can find out about all that at afterlifefrequency.com.
Yeah, I got mine. I have the Kindle edition, even though I miss sitting down reading the books, but yeah, I got it on Kindle. So I'm lazy. I'll turn on the voice text and let it read to me.
Hey,
I'm a physical reader. I have to have that book in front of me.
Yeah, I like having the book, but books on tape or ebooks. Mm-hmm. When you're driving, if you drive a lot, it's nice to have.
Yeah, you do drive a lot.
Well, I travel quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so did Donna.
Yeah, I do. Probably out of an 8-hour day, If I'm in the field all day, probably out of an 8 hour day, I might drive 5 hours back and forth between, because I'm a code enforcement officer, so I do inspections between. I go from one end of town to the other end and everywhere in between. So yeah, I do. That's interesting. I didn't think about that on tape. So yeah. So what are some of the other books that you've written? You want to tell people what some of your other books are?
Yeah, my first book, Never Letting Go, it's about learning to let go of the trauma and the distress caused by the death, but never let go of the love for the person who died.
Okay.
And Never Letting Go is a guide on the journey through grief, and it's been recommended by hospices and grief counselors all over the world. And it's an ideal gift for when you're in that shock phase where you're just sort of going through the nightmare and you're looking for something to help. And that's been a very, very healing book for tens of thousands of people worldwide. Okay. My next book it was Evidence of Eternity. And that's when people started asking me they wanted to know, is reincarnation real? Is there a God? Do animals have souls? And they started asking all these questions. And so I started presenting the evidence and the scientific basis. And that was so well received. In fact, it was also submitted for a Pulitzer Prize.
Oh, nice.
And and it was so well received that I decided to go even deeper with the scientific exploration and explanation of spiritual phenomenon. That's what led me to write The Afterlife Frequency.
Okay. All right. Well, we've taken up an hour of your time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. It was great.
Thank you. It's been very interesting. And
yes, definitely.
You are so well educated too. It just amazes me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Albert Einstein said, everyone is a genius. Just don't expect a fish to climb a tree.
Right. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Those who sat and listened to us for the last hour, we really appreciate you. So if you want to hold on, Mark, and I'm going to take us out here. Let's see. Thank you guys. Have a good night.